Hi, everyone. I hope you can make the trip and folks can find us. But we're here to look at how to make or how I make sourdough bread from the starter that we created last week. Let me quick give you a picture of the sourdough starter as it looks right now. Let me switch over here to my secondary camera. Look at I don't know, can you see all the bubbles in that? Yeah, the camera shifts in and out, but that's pretty alive. That is a very active sourdough starter, and I made a little extra of it because we're going to be making several different kinds of, or I'm going to be making several different breads. Let me switch back. I got to figure a way to do this easier. And then my mouse quits. There we go. All right, I want to show you how I make sourdough bread, and it's really easy. There are only three or four ingredients to bread anyway. It's flour, water, a little bit of salt, and something for leavening, or in our case, we're using sourdough, but we call it sourdough starter, but what it is, it's a wild yeast, and you've cultured it, you've grown it from the yeast, from the wheat itself, and it's become stronger and stronger, meaning more densely populated within the batter that you make. And you use that for the yeast, and you keep feeding it. Every time you use it, you just feed it a little more flour and water, and it's happy as can be. It'll live in your refrigerator for easily a week between feedings. And since I make bread about once a week, that is just perfect. So this is how we make sourdough bread. Let me start. I throw in a little bit of oil into the pan, and I'm going to switch to the overhead camera again so that you guys can see into our mixer. Voila. And you can see there's just a donut of oil in the bottom. And that's the only way I measure it. And it's about 2 tablespoons, but if you put 3 in there, it won't change a thing. So you can add or subtract however much. Uh, um, it's easy. You can use any kind of oil. I just put a little oil in there. And basically, I think what that helps most is that it helps the dough not to stick to the bowl. Then we're going to add a cup of this wonderful batter over here. Now, when you use this batter, sourdough starter loves air. This yeast just loves, it feeds on the wheat, of course, but it likes to have a lot of air in there. And this is a lot of air bubbles in it, but the bubbles that are in it, I think, are carbon dioxide. They're not really air. So as you whip it, it shrinks a little bit, and those bubbles go down. And so I whip some air into it. Got to keep your starter happy. And now we're going to pour some into this mixer. All right. And a little bit more, a little bit less, doesn't change a whole lot. I'm getting some water. All right, now I've got about a cup of water. And again, you can put a little more water, a little less. I don't work according to exact dimension or amounts, quantities. I work on what the dough looks like. My grandma was an instinctive cook. She worked with pinches and dabs and a little bit more and look at it and see what it looks like. On humid days, you might add a little more flour. On dry days, or if your flour is extra dry, you'd add a little more water. But there are people who will swear up and down that that baking bread is an absolute science. I understand there is a science to it, but they will say that you must use scales if you want consistent results and measure your flour and water out to the gram. I'm sorry, they've been making bread for thousands of years, and thousands of years before they even invented uh, scales to measure their ingredients out to that quantity. So I'll stick with Grandma. Her bread was great, and I love it. And if it's a little different each time, that's fine. Now we're going to put 2.5 cups of flour. You see that? That's a mounding up cup of flour. But you know what? It's about that much. And so I put about 2.5 cups of flour. The reason I put 2.5 cups of flour is because I'm about to put a 1/2 cup of oatmeal in my bread because I like what it does to the texture. If you don't like oatmeal in there, if you don't like the texture that gives, then go ahead and add just 3 cups of flour. It works. But this is the way I make it, and I like it that way. So I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of oatmeal. And again, because I like the flavor, I add 2/3 of a cup of whole wheat flour, 100% whole wheat flour. And there's my 2/3 cup. It lives in that bag. The 2/3 cup measuring thing lives in that bag because that's what I use it for. All right. Now we've got most all of the ingredients. Here is a point of contention. Most aficionados of the perfect way to make bread will tell you to never put the salt in the bread until after it's had a time to mix because you want the wheat and the wheat flour and the water to fully hydrate. Well, I understand that and it makes good sense, but I've made a lot of bread and I tested that idea and I did it both ways. And I can't tell a lick of difference. They're all the same. So I'm not going to waste time to do something that doesn't appear to make any difference in my bread. So I'm putting 1/2 tablespoon of of salt. And I've heard, don't put iodized salt in there. It'll kill the yeast. Doesn't kill mine. And I could put iodized or uniodized. You could put Himalayan sea salt, black salt, green salt. I don't care. Just put some salt in there. And a 1/2 tablespoon works just fine. Now these ingredients again, if you're not going to put anything else in there, 3 cups of flour, 1 cup of water, 1 cup of sourdough starter, and a 1/2 tablespoon of salt. That's it. I add 2/3 of a cup of whole wheat flour. So 2/3 of a cup of whole wheat flour. So I guess you'd have to add 3 1/3 cups of flour if you're going to make it. But again, I make it by what it looks like and what it feels like, not by exact scientific measurements. I don't know that I want to eat bread made by a scientist. I'll eat bread made by my grandma. So we're going to drop the dough hook in there, turn it on, and I start it on slow, and I let it run until it pretty well mixes up most of the ingredients so that I'm not flipping flour all over the place, because if you turn it up on high, it gets real out of control. And while I'm doing this, while I'm waiting for this thing to get mixed, this is a good time to oil up my bread pan. Now, I've had a hard time with my bread sticking to the bread pan because I really like these antique, really old bread pans. And what I really want to do is get some of these cast iron bread pans. They're really awesome, I think. Okay, this is about good. I'm going to turn it up on setting number 2. And we're just going to let that run for a bit. And everything will change as it mixes, as it thoroughly mixes and incorporates all the liquid into the dough. And at first it looks like, oh man, I need to, that dough is too dry. And then you keep working on it. You say, well, that dough is too wet. Just let it run. Let it see what it looks like when you're done. If it's, tough as a rock, you need to add a little flour. And if it's sticking to the sides and won't get clean, then or if it's tough as a rock, and then you add a little more flour, and if it's sticky all over the bowl, then you add a little more flour. Basically, that's the way I do it, and it works. And it keeps changing. It's also important to know that you need to let the dough rest. And we'll get to that stage here when this is done mixing up. My gears, I think, are a little tired in this mixer, but I know where I can order new ones. This thing, I lock the mixer down and put it on number 2 and just let her run. And when it's done, it finishes mixing up pretty well. Now, it is important, just like with your starter, to use non-chlorinated water. So if you've got city water, you may want to boil it first to get the chlorine out of it, or buy some bottled water that has no chlorine in it for making your bread, because chlorine is not good for your yeast. Now, there's a lot of question about the taste of sourdough bread. I happen to like the tanginess of real sourdough bread. You know, it's not something you want to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich out of, but it works great, you know, for so many other things, and I really love the taste. So I've been working on trying to get my bread to be tangy. Well, everything I try doesn't work. And I talk to others who say, oh man, their sourdough has just got a lot of punch to it. It all boils down, I think, to the flour you're using, because that's what everything I've researched about sourdough says. If you don't like the taste of your sourdough, change your flour, and that will alter the flavor of your bread. And I've had people that have said that they don't like sourdough. They used to love sourdough bread, but then they moved, and in the part of the country they're in, their sourdough doesn't taste good anymore. Well, change your flour. You know, get a different flour, and your sourdough will change flavor. It'll take a little time, but it will change. Okay, this, just for the sake of argument, we're going to say this has been 10 minutes because I don't want to have to drag it out so long. But this will rise, even if it isn't quite 10 minutes. And we open it up. Now here's our ball of dough, and it doesn't, you know, it's not unsticky, but it's not, you know, a gooey mess of glue either. But at the same time, yeah, it's going to be sticky. But what you do is you stretch it, and you stretch the wrinkles out, and you fold the wrinkles to the bottom. Now you can see this is kind of sticking to my hand a little bit, but I form it into a loaf. Can you see the oatmeal in it? Yeah, I like that. And you can see it's a little sticky, but then I'm gonna flip it over and put it in this pan. And we're gonna leave it. You leave it in this pan to rest. And this is really important. It needs to rest for about 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, when I pull it out of this pan, its texture and the nature of the dough is completely changed. It's just from sitting there that long, this dough really does change the whole nature. And I don't know what it does, but I guess it's the forming of the gluten or something, but it becomes very different. When I pull it out the second time, when I take it out of this pan, then I'll flip it over, then let it rise. Now, to let it rise, it all depends on what part of the country you're in. You've got a lot of options here. In our part of this here's Texas. It's hot down here. We run air conditioning for when we open our Christmas presents. So we don't have any trouble finding a warm place to let bread rise. But if you're up in the north up in the hinterboonies of Wisconsin, let's say, maybe up near Big Family Homestead, you might have a difficult time finding a place that's really warm, a good place to raise, to let your bread rise. What I do two things. One is we have an older gas stove, and this thing has a little candle flame in the bottom. It's not electric start, it's a actual little flame in the bottom of the stove. And again, we have a warm climate and we have a little flame in the stove. So the stove stays about 90 degrees in there. If I keep the door shut, it'll climb up to 80 or 90 degrees in there. And that is a good temperature for letting bread rise. So I can just put this pan, flip this over, put this in the oven and let it sit, and it'll rise there. Now, I found another trick that works really well. And that is, if we need to use the oven for something, what I do is I lay out one of those heating pads. Let me reach over and get the box. There we go. This is just a cheap Sunbeam. Can you see that? Yeah, it's just a heating pad, one of those electric old-fashioned heating pads. And I just lay that down on the counter. I add a couple of pot holders to lay on top of it, and I will set the pad, this pan, right on that, and then I've got a box that's a perfect size that'll cover it, and I set the box down over the top of it, and that's my little proofing oven. And that works excellent. If you need a proofing oven, that'll rise bread like a champ. It'll do a great job. So that's a good method. Two good ways. Other thing is, if you have one of those food dehydrators like an Excalibur or one of those, many times they have you can set the temperature on it and control it, and I'm told that's a really good place to proof your bread as well. Don't know, I don't use ours that way, but I'm told it works. Now, this isn't Fleischmann's yeast. This isn't that active dry yeast. This yeast will take a while to grow. I mean, you can see that it does generate bubbles, it does rise, but it's a lot slower. Now, it's doing two things when it's causing your bread to rise. It's not only rising the bread, but it's also fermenting the wheat, which is what improves the digestive qualities of sourdough bread over regular bread. Many people who are mildly gluten intolerant, they can't eat regular bread, but they have no problem with sourdough bread. Now, if you have celiac disease or any of those that are just massively gluten intolerant, almost a gluten allergy, then don't be doing that. But if you just have, a little bit of indigestion problem with regular bread, you may do fine with sourdough bread. Now, this bread doesn't rise in an hour like regular yeast bread. They say you put it aside and in an hour it'll be huge. This stuff in an hour won't look any different at all. This stuff takes 4 hours to could be even 6 hours. It depends on how warm it is and how active your yeast is. But I want to take this and set it aside and show you what one looks like. It's been rising. There's one that I did this morning while I was setting up for the devotions with Brad. Can you see that? That is, let me see if I can, I don't want to lay it over on its side, but that loaf has been rising and it is ready to put in the oven to bake. Now, here's something that you can do with your bread is you can glaze the top of the bread. By glazing, you can bake it just like this, and then what I like to do then is just rub butter on the top. Or you can do what's called a glaze, an egg wash, an egg glaze. And you can get 3 different darkness layer or levels with egg wash. If you do the white of the yolk or white of the egg only, whip it up, take a brush that stuff on there, and coat the surface with that egg wash, then bake it. It will turn it a very light, shiny, but very light, almost a little bit of brown, but not much. If you take the whole egg, white and yolk, mix it together, you'll get a little darker color. And if you take just the yolk and whip that up and paint the surface with that, then it gets a dark golden, beautiful golden dark color. And it depends on what you like. Doesn't change the taste at all. And you could choose which one you want. Now I'm going to set that aside because ta-da, boy, am I ever good. I can bake bread so fast. Now, I want to show you the difference. This much is just the regular bread without any egg wash on it at all. This section is just the white. I don't know, can you see? Yeah, you can see the color change, and you can see there's a shine. There's no shine here. There's a little bit of shine there. Here, this is a little darker. This is the whole egg mixed up, and this section is just the yolk. And you can see that gets pretty dark, and it's shiny, regular bread. So that's what I do. I don't do the rainbow. I stick with this one, but you can kind of pick whatever you would like for your bread, whatever you'd like it to look like. Now, I made a bread slicer because it's kind of hard to get bread to slice evenly, and this is my bread slicer. You like that? You can see it's kind of shaped like the bread, and this is the piece that adjusts in and out with this knob, and it adjusts the thickness of the bread that you're going to make or that you're going to get for toast or sandwiches or things like that. And this slides in there just perfectly. And then this guides the knife so that you get a nice even cut. That's because I'm not so pretty good at slicing bread, but I get a ragged cut when I do it myself. But you can see this is a good, solid, dense loaf. It's a little heavier than a lot of breads, but it's soft. It tastes wonderful. And I have noticed that we slice this bread a little thinner than normal because there's a lot more body to this, and the taste is just so good. We go through a lot of butter in this house. All right. Now, I see a lot more people in there. Welcome, everybody. Let me jump to the top and cover the comments. Oh, BB from Spain, I'm glad you made it. Marianne, glad you're here. Here, let me switch over to this other camera. That's a little better, or maybe a little worse, depends on what you think of my looks, right? Ruth Maxwell, glad you're here. Wow, Ruth, 20 hours into lockdown. BB's 12 days into lockdown. Yeah, well, you got a good time to make bread, right? Hope you have flour. Yeah, a fancy heating pad. We had the heating pad. I think somebody gave it to us, so I started using it for that. I've never used it as a heating pad for, bad shoulder or sore muscles or anything, but since we had it, I did make use of it to rise bread. Yeah, rainbow loaf. You got it. Yeah, an oversized soap cutter, very much. Yeah, we have one of those too, and I've never seen a bread cutter like this, but I wanted one that I could adjust the width of the bread. Uh, yep, it is a bread slicer. Okay, I need to work on getting some better lighting in here and cameras. Oh man, you wouldn't believe what this place looks like. I have a piece of lumber sticking over the top of the cabinet and a wood clamp holding my little camera up there. It's crazy. All right, I don't see any other questions. Yeah, soda and wheat bread. Yeah, that's soda bread. That's another kind of bread, and it also can be really good. All right. Any questions? Glad you guys all made it. And it was sort of strange doing a how do you make bread on a live stream, and I got to thinking, well, I could do some jumps ahead if I plan it right. And so I made a loaf of bread yesterday, and I glazed it 3 different ways and left it unglazed one way. So I have a rainbow loaf, and then I have one that's ready to bake right now, and one that's ready to rise. So my neighbors are going to be getting some bread. They love that. All right. No other comments? No other questions? I must have told you right. So I'm really interested though if you try this, and especially if you're making your own sourdough starter, I would love to hear how it's going for you. Come back and hit it up on the comments, even after the live stream, and let me know. Is anybody making sourdough? Is anybody starting to culture a sourdough starter of your own? Nope, you're not, huh? All right. Well, if anybody is working on it or does try it, give it a whirl. It's really a lot easier than you think. Don't get scared off. It's uh, it's hard to so many things that we are kind of slowly worked into doing cause us to forget how to do it ourselves. And we think, the only place you can get bread is to go to the store and get your own. And people say, oh, yeah, but making bread is so hard. Well, you saw how much work I did here. And honestly, I've put together a loaf of bread and got it to this stage right here where it starts rising in the pan, and it takes me 15 minutes to get there. 5 minutes to throw the ingredients together because my mixer's right here and all our ingredients are right here. And so it takes 5 minutes to throw it together, get it in the mixer, run it for 10 minutes, put it in the pan, and 10 minutes later, then I flip it. So let me, at this point, remember before when I moved it, it was a little bit sticky. Well, look at this. It's not sticky at all. It's got a little oil on the top, but the bottom side is very dry, and it's not dry as in hard, but it's not sticky at all. And you can just simply put it in the pan and flip it. Flipping it, it does help it to rise better that way. And now it's ready to rise. So it takes 15 minutes to get it to in this pan. Then 10 minutes later, you flip it. You put it where it's going to rise. And about 4 or 5 hours later, check on it, take it out, put it in the oven. 350 degrees for 45 minutes. Now that's 350 degrees Fahrenheit. For those of you in Europe and across the pond or up in Canada, you're going to have to figure that out. I don't know what the conversion is, but it's 350. I'm sure you know what temperature that is. It's the same temperature you bake a cake in or anything else you want to bake. And you put it in there for 45 minutes. Now you can, and I did this for a long time until pretty well I got comfortable with 350 for 45 minutes, did it. You can take like a meat thermometer, one of those long probe thermometers, and you poke that into the bread. And if the bread is 190 degrees, that's perfect. That's when it is perfectly done. And after doing that about 50 to 100 times, I got comfortable with 45 minutes does it. And so I haven't had a loaf of bread not get cooked yet. But those thermometers are pretty handy, give you your confidence level. And after a while, you just go to doing it. Same thing with exact measurements. Pretty soon, you start to understand what the dough is supposed to feel like, what it's supposed to look like, how it's supposed to act. And you can say, yeah, it's a little dry. I need to add a little bit of water. I was always told you add water a teaspoon at a time. You add flour a handful at a time. Just a little bit of water makes a lot of difference. And you can add quite a bit of flour and not change it a whole lot. So keep that in mind. Add water very slowly. Add flour as needed. Okay. Can you do without the mixer? Yes, you can. I have made the bread by hand. When you get your hands into your mixer bowl, it is one sticky mess. Don't add more flour. Just keep working it. As you work it and as you mix it and as the dough develops, it will start peeling that sticky dough off your fingers and everything will be good. But if you add, this is where people go wrong when they hand mix their own bread, is that they're, the bread is so sticky, they keep adding flour and pretty soon they've made a brick. If you want to build a house, then go ahead and make bread that way because you could use the loaves for bricks. But if you just be patient. Yes, it's sticky. It's supposed to be that way. As you work it, as it develops the gluten, it will stop being so sticky and it'll peel that stuff off your fingers and it'll become a beautiful loaf. Yeah, make more loaves and freeze them. Well, I can, but our freezer's full of the other stuff that we need. And I get a lot of points by taking bread and giving it away. When we had a hurricane here, and that hit our area, and we were real close. We were within a bicycle drive of where the eye of the hurricane hit, and we took a lot of damage here. But our house was dry. It was structurally okay. I had to put a new roof on it, and my barn was stripped all the way to the tar paper on the roof. So I had to put a whole new, half of the barn's roof had to be completely replaced. And all of the shingles had to be replaced on our house, but neither building leaked. Rain didn't get through any of it. So we were good in that respect. And we had some fence damage. But when we got here, there was no power, no phone, no TV, there wasn't anything. And what I did, I got home, I set up my ham radio, so I was able to talk to my wife and let her know that everything was okay. That meant a lot. And I pulled our generator out, fired it up, and I had lights and was able to operate the things here. So I said, my neighbors are struggling to get food, and I don't know that they even have, I guess a lot of them have gas stoves, but most of them wouldn't know how to make bread, and the grocery stores are all closed. So I made 5 loaves of this sourdough bread, and I went around to my neighbors and just gave them a loaf of bread. That helped a lot. These people were struggling. They took a lot of damage. Anybody who was here really appreciated a loaf of fresh baked bread when everything is so dismal and you've taken a hit like a disaster like that. So these loaves here, yeah, we're going to keep this rainbow one because I sliced it open, but the other 2, I'm going to bake them up and give them to neighbors. I can store a whole lot of flour. It's pretty hard to keep these loaves from, in the refrigerator or freezer. They'll keep there. Yeah, praise the Lord, you had a generator. Yeah, we've had that for a long, long time. We've gone through a lot of storms with that. It helps us a lot. So, yeah, I guess people would be singing Mr. Rogers' song, "Won't You Be My Neighbor?" Because you can be a good neighbor and give them bread. It's a great way to get real on the good side of your neighbors. So, okay, well, I think we're going to close this live chat because I think we're pretty well there. I hope I've answered all the questions. If you have any trouble on any of them, drop me a line and comment on any one of them. You comment on any one of my videos, I will see it. So if you pull this video up afterwards and put a comment on it, then I will see it. I'll answer it, get right back to you. Okay? Well, God bless you all, and I hope this helps. I hope you make some bread, and I hope you have a good time doing it. It's a lot of fun. And we started this 4 years ago. We have never gone back, and we haven't bought store-bought bread since. We did one time. My wife was shopping, and she said, we're getting low. I think I'll just buy some of this bread. It looks like it was on sale, and it was one of those high-end home-baked real bread. And I don't know what they put in that stuff in the stores, but I think there's a whole lot of it that's not real good ingredients because it just didn't taste good, not compared to this. You start making this bread, you're going to be spoiled. All right. Well, God bless you all. And BB, stay safe and keep everybody in your prayers. Ruth as well. Ireland is locked down. Spain is locked down. Italy's locked down. Malta's locked down. All these countries are in real strong isolation. So trying to keep a lid on the spread of this virus it's really hurting a lot of people. So let's keep them in your prayers and bake some bread today. All right. God bless you all.